Hello and welcome to The Pursuit of Justice, a podcast where I answer lunch and dinner's most pressing questions about the American criminal justice system, featuring Lunchy Wenchy and dinner winner. This week we'll tackle the question, is our current system effective in deterring crime? We'll go over the two models of the criminal process, diversity officers, turning theory into policy, the death penalty, the juvenile system, and alternatives to the carceral state. As discussed by Herbert L. Packer in Chapter 3 of Introduction to Criminal Justice and discussion number 2, there are two models of the criminal process, the due process and the criminal crime control model. Disclaimer, no one is 100% the due process model or 100% the crime control model. If anyone tells you otherwise, they are a fanatic and a big fat liar. The values behind the crime control model is that, quite simply, crime needs to be controlled by all means necessary, or else society will collapse and end as we know it. If people believe that laws are going unenforced, then everyone will just commit more crimes, and law-abiding citizens will become the victim of all sorts of unjustifiable invasions of interests. The criminal process is the most positive guarantor of social freedom. Screening subjects, determining guilt, and securing appropriate dispositions of people convicted of a crime need to be operated with the utmost of efficiency and speed. It's like Henry Ford assembly line capitalism, but on steroids. This model prioritizes quick apprehension and conviction through informal and uniform procedures, often relying on administrative processes over judicial ones. This model operates on a presumption of guilt, trusting that the police and prosecutorial screening accurately identifies probable guilt. Cases are processed like an assembly line, with the goal of swiftly moving probable offenders through the system while minimizing challenges and procedural delays. This approach aims to secure public safety by quickly incapacitating offenders. Disclaimer, the presumption of guilt is not the opposite of the presumption of innocence. They're completely different, distinct concepts. The presumption of innocence directs officials to treat suspects as innocent until proven guilty, regardless of the case's apparent facts. In contrast, the presumption of guilt is a factual prediction used in the crime control model, where efficient case processing relies on the assumption that police and prosecutor screenings are accurate. If the crime control model is like an assembly line, the due process model is like a complicated obstacle course or an adventure where the journey matters more than the destination. It questions the reliability of informal fact-finding of the crime control model, and it focuses on potential errors and observations, coerced confessions, and biased witnesses. This model aims to protect individuals from state power, demanding proper legal procedures to establish guilt. It prioritizes partial, informal trials and penalizes officers and prosecutorial misconduct over churning out mass convictions. The presumption of innocence ensures that the state must prove its case thoroughly, allowing for legal defenses that might exonerate someone even if they're factually guilty, thereby ensuring a fair and just process. It also asserts that justice should not be dependent on one's financial status. Our current system has elements of both. The due process model is reflected in the Miranda rights, where police are required to inform people of their rights when they get arrested. The crime control model is reflected in 3 strikes laws that make harsher punishments for repeat offenders, and a stop and frisk policies that allow police to profile individuals on the street and stop and frisk them. No, stop and frisk as in racial profiling, not shitty cat food, Lungy. Anyway, funny story. Did you know that some politicians genuinely believe that stop and frisk policies actually work in reducing crime? In 2018, former President Donald Trump said that indiscriminate stop and frisk policies works and is meant for problems like Chicago. And this is just not true. According to the ACLU, the homicide rates fell to an all-time low in NYC after indiscriminate stop and frisk was banned. Indiscriminate stop and frisk is ineffective, unconstitutional, creates racial disparities, erodes community trust, and makes people of color less likely to report crimes. A 2013 study found that frequent stops decrease the likelihood of young people reporting future crimes by 8%, with nearly 60% feeling uncomfortable seeking police help. Funny story again. Did you know that police officers genuinely believe that minority police tensions are because minorities are like racist against the police and that they're too obsessed with race? According to the diversity officer, police officers and black women civilians, epistemologies of race and racism in policing article, police draw on an epistemology of racial ignorance to selectively accommodate race-conscious critique while denying the history and power dynamics between institution and minority communities. Conversely, black women civilians, grounded in a standpoint epistemology, emphasize the historical roots of policing along with collective memories and lived experiences to understand the relationship between institution and minority communities. Basically, the police see these tensions as a race issue, whereas black women see it as a racism. At the time, this guy from my high school said that police brutality was a black culture issue and that black on black crime was a black culture issue, but I digress. To combat this race issue, they're trying to diversify the police force in hopes of improving police-minority relations. The idea is that if there are more black people, other people of color, white women, and gay people in the police, then hopefully minorities, aka everyone except for white men, will feel more comfortable with the police and stop being racist against the police. The idea behind diversifying the police effectively blames minority police tensions on civilians for bringing race into police encounters and directing attention away from institutionalized racism. Oh yeah, and tying it back to stop and frisk, maybe there could be better police-minority relations if police stopped frisking people. Like, honestly, it would not make a difference to me if I got frisked by an Asian cop or a white cop. But anyways, where were we? We know that the US is addicted to putting people in prison. Is it really as simple as people committing crimes so therefore they get put in prison? What is the theory behind this practice of mass incarceration? According to chapter 20 of the book, it's not quite this simple. The amount of crime, the amount of corrections in the US are not tightly connected. Also, the whole idea that people just deserve to be in jail because they committed a crime is like, what? This begs the question, what should be the purpose of intervening in the lives of offenders? Oh my god, my cats are so smart. What gorgeous, insightful questions. They're definitely getting into Brown University. There are 6 theories of corrections, or philosophies of punishment. There's sometimes a disconnect between the goals of corrections and what actual policies get put into place, because we usually have multiple goals that we want corrections to pursue. The first theory is retribution, or just deserts. Retribution is a conservative version, which is focused on making sure offenders really suffer. Supposedly, retribution can only be achieved through harsh punishments and lengthy prison terms. Just deserts, the liberal version, make sure that offenders only suffer the right amount through shorter sentences and moderate punishment. So does this actually deter crime, or? No, this theory doesn't really reduce crime, and it's not really supposed to. It's just for fun disease, and is an end in and of itself. This next theory supposedly does reduce crime, though. The second theory is deterrence, through punishing offenders so harshly that they get scared of punishment and don't commit crimes ever again because they don't want to get punished again. Of course, this theory only assumes that the offender is rational, and they rationally use their free will to assess the potential cost of committing a crime before committing that crime. But I don't know, when this girl Amanda from my high school stole from Target, I don't think she rationally assessed that she could possibly get caught and then $500 afterwards. But anyway, deterrence theory punishes the crime, not the criminal. The third theory is incapacitation, aka locking up criminals. In this theory, criminals are actually not human beings, and they are wild, predatory animals and should be locked up for their crimes. Their essential criminally natures are a given and are not going to change. There's absolutely no chance that they can be reformed, and it doesn't really matter how they got to this point in their life. We should just lock them up. Don't you have to build a ton of prisons for this theory and then spend a ton of money on these prisons? And you can't just keep every criminal in prison forever. What happens when their sentence ends? Yes, that is so true, Dinner. We'll get back to that. The fourth theory is restorative justice through reducing harm. Offenders should restore the victims and the community they've harmed, and hopefully the victim is forgiven and accepted back into the community and will stop committing crimes. Unfortunately, this theory is not based on any scientific criminology or evidence-based corrections. The fifth theory is rehabilitation. It is assumed that crime is determined by factors, so we should change those factors that are causing offenders to break the law. In the end, crime is saved and recidivism is reduced. Imprisonment doesn't work, because if you just put someone in jail without treatment, then they'll just leave prison no better off or even worse off and commit more crimes again once they're released. Ooh, now we're getting The last somewhere. Theory is early intervention, aka saving the children. Early intervention involves placing children who are at risk for a criminal future into programs early in life to prevent them from developing into a juvenile or an adult criminal. This isn't really a correctional theory because it focuses on what should be done to someone before they've broken a law instead of after. It's similar to rehabilitation, and is based on the criminological reality that some people with certain traits and who are exposed to certain social conditions develop tendencies to engage with crime. Which one of these theories do we use now? That has to do with social insecurity. What's social insecurity? As discussed by Anthony Platt, social insecurity describes significant changes in the U.S. criminal justice system from 1965 to 2000. The system became increasingly influenced by national politics, reducing local accountability. The police are no longer there to protect and serve, just serve. It is now your responsibility to learn Taekwondo and protect yourself. The fostering of social insecurity, or the moral panic surrounding crime, helped garner political support for cracking down on crime, aka overfunding the crossroads system and the police by cutting funds for public health, welfare, and education. Rehabilitation and prevention was out. Imprisonment is in. We can thank the great Richard Nixon and the great Ronald Reagan for their great influence on our criminal justice system. Ronald Reagan is quoted to have saying, "Choosing a career in crime is not the result of poverty or an unhappy childhood or of a misunderstood adolescence. It is the result of a conscious, willful, selfish choice made by someone who considers themselves above the law, who seek to exploit the hard work and sometimes the very lives of their fellow citizens." It doesn't sound like the system is going to deter any crime. Well, we have 10 more minutes left, so let's not jump to any conclusions, Dinner. All of these theories, except for the revenge theory, claim to reduce crime, but clearly not all of them do. Around the year 2000, the US started to push for more evidence-based criminal justice. If we only started using evidence-based corrections in 2000, what were we using before? Just educated wishes. Correctional quackery is what happens when you make correction policies based on vibes and not scientific research. Corrections is serious business. In the 1960s, rehab came under attack and lost its status as the dominant theory of corrections, and retribution, deterrence, and incapacitation rose to the top. Together, they provided a powerful justification for mass incarceration. Only in very recent years have we seen the revitalization, rehabilitation, restorative justice, and early intervention. If Brown doesn't accept you, I will write them a bad Yelp review because you are so smart. Something crazy about the US is that we still use the death penalty. Like, yeah, it's racist, kills innocent people, and like, who deserves to kill? But the popularity of the death penalty shows the correctional quackery, retribution, and deterrence in action. According to 21 of the book, supporters of the death penalty say that some people just straight up deserve to be executed, and that is actually in the name of the families of the homicide victims. Don't death penalty cases divert a ton of resources away from more effective assistance for families of all homicide victims? Yes, Lynchy, but as you just heard, this is a feelings don't care about your facts kind of thing. Also, supporters of the death penalty say that we must kill murderers to prevent other people from committing murder, aka general deterrence. Does this work? No, not really. The deterrent effect of a punishment is not considered a direct effect of its severity. After a while, increases in the severity of a punishment no longer add to its deterrent benefits, and actually, increases in the punishment severity have decreasing deterrent effects, so eventually increasing a punishment severity will no longer matter. Okay, so why do we use it? Honestly, there are a ton of flaws with the death penalty, like racism, killing innocent people, being too expensive, not deterring crime, and like you can just put people in prison instead of killing them. Luckily, there is a growing trend toward worldwide abolition of the death penalty. That's good, but have any kids ever been executed? Well, actually, yes. Until 2005, minors can and have been sentenced to death. Even though the death penalty for minors was ruled unconstitutional in 2005, the system for juveniles is still kind of messed up. As I mentioned before, the U.S. moved away from rehabilitation in the 1960s, and that included for kids too. It's not as bad as the adult system though, but it's still pretty bad in my opinion. According to the Juvenile Corrections PDF, the most common form of corrections for minors is probation. With probation, juveniles might also have to participate in treatment programs. Unfortunately, probation officers often have really heavy caseloads and can't dedicate much time to the juveniles they're supervising. So, it's not really surprising that probation doesn't actually reduce reoffending. In the 1980s and 1990s, juvenile courts developed a range of intermediate sanctions that are more controlling and punitive than regular probation, but less extreme and less expensive than jail. These sanctions include fines, scared straight programs, intensive supervision programs, boot camps, house arrest, and making it up to their victims. These programs are used either along with probation or instead of probation. Restitution can be like paying money to their victim or doing community service. In scared straight programs, students tour an adult jail and meet with prison inmates, and they're told they'll end up like these prisoners and end up in prison if they don't straighten up. Ironically, though, those programs actually increase subsequent reoffending. Intensive supervision programs are run by probation officers with small caseloads and are exactly what they sound like, but they don't really have an effect on reoffending. Boot camp is probably the most extreme intermediate sanction, and it literally does not work in reducing reoffending. In addition to probation and intermediate sanctions, some delinquents get sent to residential facilities, including group homes, wilderness programs, and training schools. Juvenile corrections facilities differ from adult prisons in important ways. They're smaller than adult prisons and have lower staff to inmate ratios, and they're more focused on treatment and less on punishment and control. But not all facilities are the same. Some have tens of juveniles and some have hundreds of juveniles. Some have more freedom and some are super strict like adult prisons. Some are more focused on treatment, whereas some are focused on control and punishment. Some are well run and some have tons of problems like overcrowding, violence, inadequate educational, health, recreational, and treatment services, and unfortunately more juveniles are placed in overcrowded institutions with a lot of problems than the really well-run institutions. One type of juvenile facility is the group home or the halfway house. Usually kids are sent here after serving time in an institution. The goal of these homes is to ease juveniles back into the community. In wilderness or outdoor programs, juveniles literally just do outdoor things. Both group homes and wilderness programs have mixed results in reducing reoffending. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe it depends on the actual program itself. Training schools are the most like adult prisons and have tons of problems, like being expensive, focusing on security and not treatment, being a breeding ground for staff on inmate violence, and for cliquey and bullying behavior, and for having high rates of recidivism. Not surprisingly, sending kids to training schools is not effective in reducing reoffending. Some data suggests that community-based programs are more effective in reducing reoffending than institutions. So, what do you girls think? Is our current system set up to reduce crime? No, it seems like being mean to troubled teens isn't effective in reducing delinquency. And for adults, it seems like throwing a ton of people in prison for a long time without any treatment programs doesn't prevent these people from reoffending when they're let back into society. The system should address and fix the underlying causes of crime. Also, high incarceration rates can lead to overcrowded prisons, which can then exacerbate rather than alleviate criminal behavior due to poor conditions and lack of rehabilitative services. Effective crime reduction requires a balance between punishment and rehabilitation, including programs for education, job training, mental health treatment, and substance abuse counseling. Policing practices such as stop and frisk and zero-tolerance policies have been shown to be ineffective or counterproductive. These practices can lead to community alienation and mistrust, making it harder for law enforcement to work with communities to prevent crime. Common practices like the scared straight programs tend to be based in correctional quackery. Lastly, the criminal justice system often focuses on reacting to crime rather than preventing it. Effective crime reduction strategies include community-based programs, early intervention initiatives, and efforts to address social inequalities, which are often underfunded and overlooked. Are there any alternatives to our current system? As I mentioned before, rehabilitation is becoming more popular. For juveniles, punitive and tough approaches to reducing crime don't work. But research suggests that some rehab programs are effective in reducing delinquency. Also, rehab programs cost less than punitive approaches and are more worth it in the long run by preventing delinquency and other problems. Some people have recommended that the justice system reduce or eliminate the use of training schools for juveniles. There's a Missouri model case that we can look at. After the 1980s, Missouri moved away from the use of training schools. They replaced their training schools with small treatment centers dispersed across the state that aim to create safe, non-punitive environments that are conducive to rehabilitation. This also allowed delinquents to be closer to home so their families can visit and be involved in the treatment process. Staff were given extensive ongoing training and were encouraged to adopt the therapeutic orientation of the model. As of 2010, Missouri has benefited from a relatively low rate of juvenile recidivism, especially in comparison to states that still use the large prison-style facilities. It's believed that the lower rates of juvenile reoffending save Missouri money in the long run. More states can adopt this model. It feels like treating kids like kids works in creating better kids. As discussed by Chapter 30 of the book, there are possible alternatives to the carceral state, but this is such a new thing, it's really just all theory and not reality. We really just don't know. But anyway, one decarceration program can be decriminalizing certain crimes that put a lot of people in jail, like decriminalizing drugs. By the way, you can refer to this essay that I wrote in 10th grade called Drug Reform is Dope, which is basically about decriminalizing drug use. If you don't want to change the criminal laws, you can also try reducing police enforcement, like just arresting less people, but this isn't as impactful as decriminalizing drugs. You could also start a probation revolution and shorten the length of prison sentences or hand out fewer prison sentences. You can give suspended sentences or probation to people who are already in prison. Another decarceral program is sending people to diversion programs via probation instead of jail. Another program is sending people to mental hospitals instead of jail. But this has its own set of issues like not being effective and there being a risk of human rights abuses. These strategies are not all mutually exclusive. A decarceration movement would probably involve all of these methods. It's important to remember that these are all just maybes, and the decarceration movement is still just a conversation and a goal to work towards in the future. In this week's podcast, we tackled the question, is our current system effective in reducing crime? We went over the two models of the criminal process, diversity officers, turning theory into policy, the death penalty, the juvenile system, and alternatives to the carceral state. Lunching and dinners both say no, that our system is not effective, and we should turn toward alternatives to the carceral state. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Leave a comment in the comments and let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like and subscribe.